Hi everyone, Ella Hackney here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel where I love to interview authors, illustrators, creators, podcasters, even book reviewers to see where they've come, see their journey, how they got to where they are, and tips and tricks for all us authors and illustrators out there. And today I am in the presence of greatness because I
Stop
am
it.
I'm speaking to a New York Times best-selling author who has sold over 3 million copies of his how-to series, and he has generously given me his time today for the second time. Adam Wallace, welcome.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Good to see you as always.
Good to see me in my temporary surroundings where I think I blend into the wall.
That's right, in your Echo studio.
My Echo studio. So for those out there who aren't familiar with your journey, can you please just where you started and bring us up to speed where you are now?
Yeah, cool. I mean, you said you don't have much time, so I'm going to give the short version, which will only take like 2.5 hours. So is that okay?
That'll be fine.
Sweet, excellent. Settle in, everyone. Get a cup of tea. This is going to go wrong. No, it's not. Well, I mean, there was a lot of steps in it. So going right back, I loved writing as a kid. And my grandmother, well, my mum's mum was an actress and wrote a little bit and played the piano. My dad's mum spoke like 5 different languages, was an amazing pianist, and she also wrote kids' books as well. And my stepdad was a teacher librarian. My dad was a teacher, but wrote funny little stories for us and stuff like that as well. So always surrounded by stories. So I love stories. And oh, I should have won. I actually got a story I wrote in grade 4, which is falling apart, which my Oma, my dad's mum, she typed it up for me on a typewriter. We made it into a little book and stapled it and everything. I illustrated it. My poor Oma, like there was this story about frogmen that come out of the water and bite everybody's faces off and stuff. And this lovely little Czechoslovakian woman is typing it all out for me. So yes, I always write. Then I almost failed year 12 English. Like I was failing for 3/4 of the year, and yeah, hated it. And I was reading books I didn't like, but also my what they call like my creative essays, creative stories were failing as well. I was getting like 3, 4 out of 10 and things like that because I just wasn't writing what they wanted, which is on me as well. Like I just wanted to write what I wanted to write, and they wanted flowery, descriptive love. So I actually found out, right, years later, like 25 years later, that my girlfriend in year 12, Virginia, oh, this is being recorded. I could get in trouble here. But I found out that like some of the topics were chosen by our teacher because he knew that she would do well in them. And all us like not just immature boys, but like extra immature boys, we were hopeless. I was writing stories about playing cricket for Australia and sort of funny little silly stories. Anyway, basically failed, but I ended up writing what I had to write to pass. I passed just, um, and so I kind of just got put off writing a little bit from that because I was like, well, to pass and to get the marks, I had to write stuff that I didn't like. Like that seems dumb to me. And so, being again very mature, I went, I'm never writing again because it's the worst. And so I didn't. So I became an engineer. Exactly. So I became an engineer and did math. I love maths as well. So I did all maths and everything. And engineering wasn't great. Almost failed my first year of engineering as well. I was a really good student. Really great. Before that, before like year 12, I was like an 85 plus student in everything. So it was a bit of a shock to the system. But when I was bored, I just couldn't concentrate. So anyway, this really is the short version, trust me. So anyway, like 10 years later, um, my what would she have been? Possibly fiance at the time, was doing a creative writing course, and she wrote and illustrated a kids book. And she's an amazing artist and did this incredible artwork and this fun story, sort of time travel story. And I was like, "That's amazing." She's like, "Anyone can write a children's book," which is what a lot of people say, Lauren. A lot of people say.
Slow down there.
This is a whole other interview we got to talk about that one. But you know what I've realized? I used to get a little bit put out and everything. But what I've realized is it's actually true. anyone can write a children's book. Doesn't mean they can write a good one, but anyone can write it. So I'm like, yeah, sure you can. Go for it. But anyway, at the time, also, I was like, I couldn't. And she's like, I bet you could. I'm like, I bet I couldn't. She actually bet me $10 that I could. So I took the bet, wrote the story. It was probably pretty average, I don't know, but I loved it. Paid her $10, and then that just set me off. So that was I think that was the end of 1998 or in 1998 somewhere. And I reckon I've written every single day since. Like it just set off this spark in me that having not written for 10 years, apart from birthday cards, basically, I just exploded. Like I did the Artist's Way, which is just amazing. And I just wrote, and it all came out sort of rhyming stuff. And because I used to, again, when I wrote birthday cards, I'd write little rhymes for people. So I loved writing in rhyme. And so I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. I don't know how many hundreds of stories I wrote that first year, but it all kind of flooded out of me. And yeah, it just sort of set loose this thing. So then I just wrote for a few years. Like, I don't even know when I started submitting, but at some point I started submitting, and just everyone said no. So I just got rejected by everywhere. And I think I got to about 150 rejections, and it was about, must have been in 2004. I ended up self-publishing in 2004. I should have brought examples. Yeah, it was great. So I did a different one to the ones you have actually. So yeah, so I did Better Out Than In, and I could only afford a cover and 18 pictures at the time. So, yeah, so these ones all came later, but they changed everything as well, those drawing books. But yeah, did Better Out Than In, and I'd written these stories, and I was working in before and after care, and I tested them on the kids who were very, very honest. At one point I read, not from this book, but from another story, I started reading to like 5 kids. It was only a short story. It was like 1 page. Halfway through, 2 kids just got up and walked away and just went and did something else. I'm like, okay, this story sucks. So yeah, exactly. So anyway, did Better Out Than In, self-published it, and was lucky enough. I just went on to, I don't know if it's still around, the style file. And in the style file, people could put little sort of folios of their work. And I found this guy. I'm like, his work's amazing. So I showed Andrea, and she's like, yeah, it's amazing. So I messaged him. I'm like, you keen? He's like, yeah, cool. I said, let's meet up. So he came over, and this guy's name was Heath McKenzie. Just he was just starting out at the time as well. So he rocks up, we open the door, and he looks at Andrew, and he's like, I know you. And she's like, I know you. And they were actually doing fine art. They were doing like majoring in arts at university together. So they knew each other. But Andrea hadn't picked up when she'd seen his work. So, so Heath illustrated it and it was amazing. And so I printed 2,000 copies, got a loan from mum and dad, printed some copies, and they sold it really quickly, like quicker than I expected, mainly just at markets on the weekends. I didn't really do any school visits, just a couple. And so, yeah, I'm like, oh, maybe there's something in this. Like, obviously they're having a bit of a reaction. I recorded a CD of it, and I'd buy like the empty CD like boxes, and I would print out the labels, stick them onto the CDs, print out the things for the cover, and put them in the box, and I'd stuff the CDs by hand. Eventually, I reckon it was about a year or two later, I discovered this place that would print like, it was like 500 CDs for $800, but you just get them in this big box. I'm like, sold. So yeah, so that was the sort of start of it. And then from there, when I've been working at the aftercare, I'd done some little drawings with kids, and I think it started with the cat. One day we said we're doing cartooning. I decided to do cartooning with them. So I'd looked up some different animals online, started drawing one with the kids, and just started telling a story as I was drawing it. And so I'm like, and the kids just went with it, and they just sat there for like 2.5 hours just drawing. I'm like, ooh. So then I did these little tiny how to draw books, which then morphed eventually into the collections that you've got. So yeah, so that kind of went from there. And then eventually, again, this is taking too long. So basically, I ended up through my dad, one of my dad's best friends, his daughter was at Sid, my dad's friend's party. And she's like, oh, I'm doing some freelance work for this publisher. And dad's like, oh, Adam's been writing books. And so she was an editor. And so she's like, oh, tell him to send him in. They're just starting up children's books. So I did that. And they got picked up there. We did like a partnership publishing thing. That went off from there. They eventually went bankrupt, but it was a really great start. And they redid Better Out Than In, and Heath did like another 80 pictures for that. And so many circumstances happened. So I was still self-publishing every year, but then friends of mine went to a dinner party, and at the dinner party, they're next to this guy. What do you do? Who are you? What do you do? Blah blah blah. And this guy's like, "Oh, I'm head of a children's book publishing company." And so he was the head of, it was Stephen, who was the head of Hinkler Books. And so they ended up getting me a meeting, but they didn't take anything. And I sent them a few things. They didn't take them. Then they're just like, we've got this idea. We want to get like 70 rhymes for this joke book. And I think it was like 100 tongue twisters or something like that. Limericks, all of them, tongue twisters, limericks, and rhymes. So do you want to do it? And it was a flat fee job. I'm like, yeah, no one's ever paid me for writing before. I've always had to pay. So I did that, which led to like 9 or 10 books with them. And then next in the line was, then I ended up going to a launch of Tanya McCartney, one of Tanya McCartney's books, one of the Riley books that she was doing through Ford Street. And I'd met her through Kids Book Review. She'd been amazing, had done reviews of some of my books and was just so lovely. And Paul Collins from Ford Street was at the launch. And so I ended up having coffee with him afterwards. And he's like, do you have any staff? Are you represented for your school business? I'm like, no. So I went with CreativeNet. A year later, he's like, would you like to write us a book? So I did that. So that was my first traditional publishing deal. Then like a couple of years after that, I got an email from someone who had been at Hinkler, and they were now in America at a publisher. And they're like, we've got this idea for a story about kids who try to catch a leprechaun for St. Patrick's Day. Do you want to write it? I'm like, yeah, sure. And it was a little, again, flat fee book. So I did that, and that was the How to Catch series. So just these series of little moments that I think was so important, even in just sort of, so there's this great theory from Derek Sivers, and I'll say it in nice language, but basically he's like, if it's not a hell yeah, it's a no. But at the start of your career, you say yes to basically everything. Not everything. Like you want to still sort of have your, your values, I guess, in what you're writing and all that sort of stuff. But you say yes because you never know where it's going to lead to. And so I heard that later, but basically I was just saying, if I got to write, I was happy. As long as I was writing, I was happy. And so if someone says, do you want to write here? Yes, I do. So I do it. But then he says, once you get to a certain point where you don't have to do that, then if it's not like a hell yeah, it's a no. Because otherwise you take on these things that are like, oh yeah, I suppose so. And then a hell yeah comes along and you don't have time to do it. So yeah, but at the start, I think it's really important just to take the opportunities to write and learn. And I learned so much about editing, about deadlines, about working fast, about like just, yeah, I learned so much working with a small publisher, with a partnership publisher, with a mass marketing publisher. And yeah, it was just, anyway, the end.
There's so much I want to talk to you about. So can I just touch on for a minute, because you're my first author that's mentioned flat fee work. So for authors out there who haven't heard of this either, so Adam's done self-publishing, you've had traditional contracts, but also flat fee. Can you walk us through what that is exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can, yeah, so they also did the partnership publishing, or I think it's called hybrid publishing sometimes. So basically that is where it's sort of the step up. So self-publishing, you do everything yourself, basically. You can outsource it, but you're paying for everything. Hybrid or partnership publishing, I put in money, they put in money, and then you kind of split the profits. Traditional, you get an advance against royalties usually. So you might get, let's say an easy number, you get paid $1,000 to give them the book, basically, as they're taking the license to print the book. And so then when the royalties for sales reach $1,000, you get royalties on top of that. With a flat fee book, basically what you're doing, and usually most often I think it's when it's their idea. So they'll have a concept, an idea, and you write it for them. You're kind of like a writer for hire. So a flat fee is you get paid, again, obviously the easy example, $1,000, and that's it. You give them the story, you're giving them the copyright to the story, you're handing over the story, and it could sell as has happened. So all the How to Catch books are flat fee books. So I got paid a fee to write them, but they've now sold, I think now it's up to about 5 million copies, but I don't get extra for selling all those extra copies. Like sometimes bonuses can be built into it. Like it might say, if it sells 10,000 copies, you get your flat fee again, or something like that. But generally you get paid, and that's it. You get paid to write. But again, especially, well, even like, especially early, it's a great learning experience. Like all the Hinkler stuff was flat fee as well. But just to get to work with editors and to get paid at all for your writing is kind of amazing. And But then even later to do it, those How to Catch, they were flat fee and they've sold a lot and everything, but that's led to so much else. Like basically they've marketed me and my writing to America. And I've had deals in Slovenia, America, Australia because of those books. So it's always worth it. And especially writing it with just that joy of getting to write for someone, as opposed to like, oh, I'm not getting royalty. Like, if you got that feeling, don't do it. Like, do it for the joy of writing it, and you just never know what's going to come out of it.
Yeah, that's great advice. So for authors out there that are used to going on the publisher website, you click submissions and you pop it in, how do you know if that publisher offers flat fee work, and how do you let them know you're available? Is it something you should maybe put on your LinkedIn account or your Instagram?
Good question. I don't know if publishers would necessarily say it. Like, generally, it's when I think they might. I mean, they might. Generally, it's when an offer comes in, they'll say, we're offering you a flat fee of $700 for this story. And that's when I found out with a few. Even or when like again, it's often their concept. So when Source Books, who's a company in America, came to me and they're like, we want to do this idea about the leprechaun and blah, 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 blah. It'll be a flat fee of 750. So they just were right up front about it. This is what it's going to be. So often it'll be that. But again, usually that's when it's their concept. I think generally it's when it's their concept and they're coming to you. If it's yours, I think it would be a little bit rarer. But if that's all they did, they probably would say it on the website, I reckon. Yeah, so it might be under submission guidelines or somewhere around there, but it might have a little for authors section. I'm totally guessing. It could say anything, but I think it would. I think it would, if they just did flat fee, they might just say, as a publisher, we don't offer royalties. And if they say they don't offer royalties, that means it's a flat fee, basically.
Okay. No, that's excellent, because you're the first author to sort of give this as an option. So far we've only talked self-publishing and traditional contracts. So if there's another option out there, I think a lot of authors are cheering.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
in your journey, pros and cons of self-publishing, please, because Adam, I love your books, and I know these are your self-published ones, but they're one of my favorites, especially Stickman. So everyone out there, if go onto Adam's website, purchase it. I've had kids read it from 6 to about 12. Say 12,
Yep,
being
sort of
the
middle upper primary, yeah.
Yeah, they really like it. And I'm a 40-something-year-old kid and I love it. So tell me the pros and cons of your self-publishing journey, please.
Sure. Well, the pros definitely outweigh the cons for starters. For me, they did anyway. I know for some people they may not, but yeah, definitely for me. Well, I mean, the first pro is it meant I had a book where, as I said, I was getting rejected by basically every publisher in Australia, most of them more than once, because I got up to 150, 200. I think I'm up to nearly 500 now, to be honest. I actually had about 90 rejections last year, 90 something rejections last year, I think. So yeah, they're still coming in, but self-publishing means you can do it. And there's some books that may not suit publishers at that time. Like they might not be a safe bet, I guess, in a way. They might be a bit sort of left of center, which generally publishers are pretty good with, but they might not. Or it might not be something that they're looking at, because publishers are generally looking at books they're going to publish at least a year in advance, and sometimes more. Some books I've had submitted to the publisher, and from that date to when it comes out is over 2 years. So they're often looking at ones that are going to come out way down the track. So they're almost trying to predict what the trends will be in that time. So yours might not fit the trend at what they're looking at doing, type thing for that time. So means you can just bring it out, and generally, or if it's on Amazon, it's ready to go in like 3 days once you put it up there, and it's free to put on there, and people can print on demand. I haven't self-published for a couple of years now, generally, or I've done one since COVID, I think. We're looking at doing some more. And actually, no, I've done a couple on Amazon anyway, but I usually go to like an actual printer and get copies of the books as well. So I think I'm down to about 5,000 books in my garage. But when I started, it was all I was doing. I had boxes in the cupboards where the clothes were, because we only had a carport at that point. I had boxes in the carport. I had boxes in the spare room. And so that's one con for a lot of people, I guess, is you potentially have stock and boxes everywhere that you've then got to sell as well. So it actually was a pro for me in a lot of ways having to do this, but it can be a con. A lot of authors can be a bit introverted, I guess, and not really potentially strong in sales and marketing, which I'm not either. But my sales and marketing was just to go, all right, I'm gonna go around to every school I can. I'm gonna go to markets on the weekends, and on Wednesdays I used to go when I started. I'm just gonna do everything I can to get it out there in face to face. And so yeah, did schools. I would drive around to schools and drop off flyers and books. I would send mail outs to schools. I did email outs to schools. I went to markets and met teachers and did that. So basically, you're well, I mean, really, you're the author, potentially illustrator, unless you're paying an illustrator to do it. Um, Marketer, publisher, everything, publicist, everything. So that's tricky for some. But again, for me, that was a real pro because I'm quite introverted as well and quite shy and wasn't confident speaking in front of people. So it really got me out of my comfort zone. And to the point, my first school I did, first talking, I used to go to open mic sessions and read my stories as well, just to get used to. I used to go on community radio and read my stories on community radio, just to get used to doing that. And I remember the first open mic I went to was in Hawthorne at the town hall, and there was like, I don't know, 100 people or something there, and people reading this like, amazing poetry and saying these beautiful things. I get up there with Valerie's Vomit to read, and so I'm up there and I am packing myself, and so I get up, go to say the first word, and my entire body just broke into this cold sweat. I was shaking. But now I can do that sort of thing without thinking about it. So it was that thing that seemed like a con at the time. It seemed so hard, but it enabled me to get so much better at it that then going to schools became easier and presenting at schools. And those first few years, obviously wasn't getting any royalties at the time. Even once I got published, I didn't get royalties from publishing. So I started writing in 1998, self-published 2004. I reckon my first royalties I got were $24, and that was from Amazon. And then in about 2015, I think, or so, I got royalties from Ford Street for the first book I did, and that was, I think, maybe a couple of $100. And so I hadn't had royalties. So for me, going to schools, talking to the kids, working out how to sell the books to the kids and do it through that, I had to get good at it, or I wasn't going to be an author for much longer. Like if I couldn't sell the books, I was done. So yeah, it was and I was still engineering at the time. I think that's a really important thing for me as well, is that I didn't just go, I'm going to quit engineering and do the books full time straight away, because I think for me, that puts so much pressure on the books that if I have a market and it doesn't go well, or a school where kids don't buy books, I'm in panic mode because, oh my God, I've got to sell the books. This is my income. And then it becomes a business and not my passion, which it was and still is. Whereas if I knew I had just and wasn't a lot I was getting from engineering because I'd gone part-time, but I'm getting that steady sort of, at least then I've got a base income. If I do well at the books, it's great. If I don't, doesn't matter, but I've got time to write, got time to sell. So I didn't want to put that massive pressure on the books back then. It took me, it was about 5 years. So I started in 2004, self-published. 2009, I left engineering. I still actually do a little bit on the side. I've got playground safety audits that I data enter every now and again. So yeah, so they're there, and so I think that was really important for me. Okay, so pro, con. Another con, you've got to finance everything yourself as well. So if you've got an illustrator, you're paying the illustrator. If you want an editor and you're not going to edit yourself, you've got to pay an editor. So it means that you're starting. So if you get picked up by a traditional publisher, you're starting ahead because you might get paid your $1,000 or whatever. If you self-publish, you're potentially starting. Well, I end up getting it to about $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000 to do a couple of thousand books. So 8,000 down. So I've got to make that back before I'm even breaking even. But once you break that down as well, especially when I was selling a lot at schools and markets, you realize that. So say I'm selling a book for $15, and I would do like those drawing ones, 15 each or 3 for 30. So $10 each. So that's the average to $12. So I've got to, if it's $8,000, I've got to sell around 700 books and I break an even. I'm like, well, I can do 700 books. Like that's massively doable. So especially if I go to a market or two a week, and even if I sell 15 or 20 books, well, 20 books, that's less than a year. And I've made it back to even. And often I would sell more, and I was doing schools as well. So breaking it down was really important for me to go, you know what, this is massively doable. And like that first book, I had to pay back mum and dad as well for lending me the money. Not had to, but I did. Um, and so yeah, so I think that's really important. I think so. Yeah, so you got to put the money out, which can be a bit daunting as well to invest that in something you don't know how it's going to go. But I figure that's business, isn't it? That's when you do a business, you put money in, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've had books that haven't made or haven't made back their money. But then I've had books like those how to draw books. I don't even know. I think I've sold about 80 or 90,000 of those or something like that. So they kept me going for a long time. Like they made really good money. So yeah, it definitely can once you get going and they get a bit of momentum. And yes, that was definitely a pro. Another pro is which again is a bit of a con in one way, you have control. So you can test your work on kids and work out what works and write that book. Whereas again, a publisher may be fine with that, but they may want to take it in a different direction as well. Often great. They're a business. They want your books to do well. So they're going to take in that direction. But if you're really set on it being a certain way, self-publish. Because A, you don't want to be like that with a publisher. If you go to a publisher and they offer changes and you're like, no, I'm not changing it, they're not going to want to work with you again. You've got to be open to at least discussing the changes and stating your position. But if you self-publish, do it your way, and then you live or die by the sword kind of thing as well. Like if you, which is kind of exciting. Like you're like, wow, this is the book. This is the book that I want to write. I want to write it exactly this way. You do it. If it goes great, that's on you. But if it doesn't, that's on you as well. But that's kind of cool. I like that. So yeah, I don't know. I got distracted. I think I said some pros and cons in there.
I think you're very optimistic because you said a lot more pros, but also I've kind of learned from you that a con isn't always a con. It's just a learning tool or an opportunity to do things different. So probably
Yeah,
I shouldn't have said pros or cons because really it's you either win or learn. That's it, isn't it?
I think so.
Do you find when you are submitting, because you've self-published and you've done the hustle and you've done all this stuff yourself, does that help you work with a publisher because you can prove you can do it?
Great question. And that's one of the reasons I actually first published. Like part of it was I wanted to get a book in my hands, actually do a book. But part of it was I thought if I can self-publish this book, sell in my mind at that time, sell 1,000 copies, because I read a stat where it said, I think this has changed now actually. I heard another stat the other day, which was I can't even remember now. It was like this massive percentage of books sell like an average of 12 copies or something, but something like 90 back then, so this is like mid 2000s, 90 something percent of books don't sell more than 1,000 copies. So in my mind, if I could self-publish, sell 1,000 copies, I could then go to a publisher and say, this book has obviously got a market. If I can sell 1,000 on my own, you'll be able to sell heaps because you've got all your marketing and all that sort of stuff as well. And that's another thing about if you go with a publisher, they have the reach and the distribution and the marketing. They'll need to sell probably at least 10 times more books than you financially for you to receive the same income. So, for example, on those how to catch books, because I did the illustrations myself, they're really simple writing. So I did the editing myself as well. Then, and the layout, which is really simple again, nothing to it. They cost me just for the printing. So like a couple of dollars a book for printing. And if I average about 10 or $12, I'm making $8 or $10 a book. Through a publisher, it's different. It's been different with different publishers, but generally with a publisher, ones I've worked with previously in Australia, on average, because you'll get a different percentage depending on if it's a bookstore sale or a book club sale or this sale or that sale discounted. It averages out to about maybe 30 to 40 cents a book or something like that. So
Slight difference.
yeah, slight difference, but they can also sell 100,000 books a lot quicker than you can. But also a lot of books. I mean, read a stat from America, there was a court case for something recently, and basically it's like 85% of books done by publishers don't reach the numbers they want them to reach. So there's potential even with a publisher they may not sell, which is also great. It's that thing again of what's a con, where it's like you can look at it going, oh, they don't sell, but then you can look at it going, oh, that's great. That means there's this little space where you can jump into, because a lot of books aren't going to do that great anyway. So you've got this space to jump into. Anyway, so what was the question? Okay, and I remember the question. So yes. So when submitting to publishers, I think that if you've done it and done it well, you've just shown initiative. You've shown you've got ideas that work with people. You've got get up and go to get it out there, and you're going to push your books and put them out there and promote them. And so I think that's really important. So yeah, if you can say, and even if they don't take that book, you might go, I've self-published this book, and again, 1 or 2,000, I've realized probably isn't enough. If you went to them and said, I've sold 15,000 of these books, they might go, oh, okay, then that's because there's a lot of I think it was, I'll probably get this wrong. I think it was Celestine Prophecy was self-published, and they sold or Aragon was self-published, and they sold like copies out of the back of the car. Rich Dad Poor Dad was self-published. Andy Griffiths is self-published. So if you can do that and sell a lot and show that there's a market for it, publishers are businesses. They're going to look at it and go, oh, this person's got something either with these books, or they might say, that doesn't suit us. What else have you got? Because obviously you've got something. So that's really important too, is not to just have, if you've just written one story, turned it into a book, self-published it, that's great. But if you go to a publisher and they don't want that particular book, and they go, what else have you got? And you've got nothing, then you're in trouble. So it's always great and again, just to keep writing, A, to get your craft better, but B, to just have it there. Like if they go, what else have you got? So now, so I actually got a meeting after this with a publisher where they're like, have you got anything you can send us? I'm like, yeah, here's 4 concepts that I can send you. And I've written 3 stories in each concept. So to have that there and be able to just go, yep, sure, here it is great. Otherwise, you've got to sort of say, yeah, I've got an idea. I'm going to write it and I'll get back to you in a year. Too late, generally, like your yesterday's news.
Yeah. Well, also, I want to touch on you submitting there, because you are all in with your process. When I spoke to you last, you go as far as doing up merchandise, jingles if it's needed. You go above and beyond. And for those out there who just write or just illustrate, tell me about, firstly, how you go above and beyond with your submitting, and then why.
Okay. And look, let me also say here that a lot of those ones that I've done that haven't been picked up, so this is not to say it's a great thing, but I don't know. I just think a lot of this. I've heard a few podcasts recently, and this is how I kind of like to try and live my life. It's like, well, if you're doing a chore or something that is, for a lot of people, admin or submitting and that sort of thing is that business side of it. It's not the fun side of writing. How can you make it exquisite, or how can you make it fun? And for me, to make a submission fun, I'm going to be like, oh, and here's some ideas for merchandise. So if this character's an inventor, we could have this and this and this and this and this as the merchandise. And I've also written a TV script as like an episode to go with the first book. And I've also thought of a really cool theme song. And so I've got that there for you. So a lot of it is making it fun for me, and hoping that they then see that fun in it, but also saying to them, yeah, this is a book, but here's some potential of what it could possibly become. And I think part of the problem for me was watching The Toys That Made Us. I don't know if you've seen The Toys That Made Us. Yeah, it's amazing. And they're just like, they would do a TV show to market the toys basically. But so in a way, the TV show becomes the merchandising for the merchandise, but then they'll have a comic to go with it as well, and they'll have just little books about the characters and spin-offs and stuff. It's like, why does it just have to be a book? Like, and I know these are book publishers, but they're also, when you see your contract, you're signing on for the subsidiary rights for merchandise and TV and movies and spin-offs and comics and all that sort of stuff as well. So again, to me, I think a lot of it is just showing I've thought about this. Even if they don't ever do it, you've shown to them, here's a book idea I've got. But at the same time, I've been thinking deeper about this and thinking, where can we go with this? Like, how far can we go? And I think, again, you've got to really, there's a lot of people submitting to publishers, like a lot, a lot, a lot. And which is why these days, a publisher might open just on Wednesdays for submissions, or, in the month of January for picture books or whatever it is. You can't, or twice a year some are doing. And so there's going to be people just hammering. And I think, number one, the story's got to be amazing. So just work on it. And that was advice that Andy Griffiths gave me early on, which I was just thinking about today, actually, where it's like, his advice was, get your work as good as you can and the rest will start taking care of itself. So just really honing your craft, I think, is number one, because you can have all these great ideas about merch and this and this and this. If it's not a good story or it's poorly written, they're not going to care about that. Like, the publishers want something that's amazing that they're going to work on, but something that they go, oh yeah, this is really going to sort of capture people. So to have that straight away is going to make you stand out, and it's going to put you above a lot of people who are submitting, who haven't gone that extra mile to really think about the story and even test it on. Go to a school and do a free visit to your kid's school and say, can I just sit in on a class, read my story, and get some feedback from the kids, because they're the target age of who I'm aiming at. If you can then say to a publisher, I've done that, I've been to 5 schools, so I've seen 200 kids, I've tested the book, worked on their feedback, really working into the age group, that's going to set you apart. And then, if you can say, I've done all this pre-work to get the story as good as I can to this point, but also here's some other ideas. Again, it's just that, which again, I think is self-publishing as well. It just shows that you start to look into the industry and understand the industry. And I think, I don't know, that's attractive to me. Is if someone came to me and said, I've put in all this stuff and I think this could be really cool to do this. And, oh, how about this? Like, that just shows that they're not just like, I've written a book, here you go, which is fine. But I think, you need to kind of just set yourself apart a little bit. And I know back in the old days, it used to be like, send it in on colored paper with perfume and a lollipop and stuff like that. And that's fine. And maybe it works. And I've done that. I've done the lollipops and sent all stuff in as well. But I think if that becomes the norm, you got to think of another way to be able to stand out. And so it's just one for me that I kind of think, yeah. So I had one series where I had 26 characters and I'd written merchandise for every one of them. I'd written a theme song, like a song to introduce all the characters, which could also be an introductory book. Even just to say, though, some potential further options after the book are TV, movies, merchandise. Like, even just to say that, just to show that you've kind of thought this is opportunity to expand as well. Because you look at anything really, but like Bluey is a good example, where it started off as a little sort of TV series, and now there's books and there's backpacks and there's this and there's that. Bluey's got teeth. Bluey's a she. She's got 2 books on the New York Times bestseller list at the moment. So from the show that started, the books are now New York Times bestsellers. So just showing you've thought about it. And again, doesn't mean it'll happen, especially not straight away, but it's in their minds that, oh, this is a possibility, and they've thought about it. And so, I don't know, it feels like a good thing.
And then they also probably will remember you in the future, because, that's memorable, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So for anyone who wants to contact you, Adam, today, because I could talk to you for a long time, but I have to pick up my kids from school. I would love to chat again down the future with you. You seem to know a whole lot more. There's so many more layers, and there's so much more to unpack with this conversation. But if anyone out there hears this interview, how can they contact you?
So my website, it's a tricky one. If you Google Adam Wallace, which is WALLACE, or Adam Wallace author, it usually comes up with my website. But basically, it's adam-wallace-books.com. My email is just wally@adam-wallace-books.com. And on all of it, like Instagram, I'm Adam Wallace Stuff. On Facebook, I think I'm Adam Wallace Books. And then on Twitter, I'm Wally's Books. So through any of those as well. Yeah, anyone, feel free to ask. If you've got questions, just shoot an email or something like that. That'd be great.
Yeah, I remember the very first time I nervously, I
Yeah.
think, came through your website, and I nervously just thought, oh gosh, he's so successful. He's not going to want to talk to me. 10 minutes later, I'm at work. Your number comes up. I hide in a broom closet, and I'm like, hello. Like, you do. You are open to so many people, and you're so supportive of everyone in industry. And I mean, I don't have to say it here, but please follow Adam, share his stuff, buy his books. I mean, his self-published ones are really good. I love them. I'm still rubbish at drawing though, Adam.
Not rubbish, just different to other people. There's no good and bad. But also, it's interesting you say that, and I've been doing just a little thing on Facebook at the moment, which I think actually you did comment on. But I was so fortunate when I was starting out. Like people just took me aside, offered me advice, and people who were like Andy Griffiths and Lee Hobbs and Phil, the people like at the top of the tree. And I remember back at the start just going, if I ever get to the point where I know enough to be able to pass something on, I would always be open because it just made so much difference. Those people just taking the time and what they know about the industry and having gone through the 10 or 15 years to be able to then distill it into a couple of hour chat, it was invaluable. So yeah, I'm always open to doing that. I think it's that sort of pay it forward type thing.
Yeah, yeah, you're really good at making us newbie authors feel like we belong. So, Adam,
Very
thank
good.
you so much for your time today. And I'm hoping there's a part 3. Thank you so much.
Definitely.